Nostalgia is a dangerous thing. What starts with some company rebooting a cartoon you sort of liked as a kid can end up with you live streaming your 3-hour mental breakdown about how SJWs have ruined your childhood. In my hunt for GPUs to benchmark for the Scalper Pandemic series, I happened upon a GTX 670 that, by chance, was the exact same model as the one I purchased some 6 years ago. A purchase that would unwittingly begin my journey into the 9 circles of the PC enthusiast scene. Upon being faced with an artifact of my own history, would I be moved to make a series of increasingly bad decisions that would culminate in an ill-advised and very public act of self-immolation? Or would it be just another review of an aging graphics card? So yes, you could say the GTX 670 and I have history. In 2015, after deciding I wanted to get back into gaming, I purchased one for £100 from used retailer Sex to replace my exceptionally outdated GTX 260. As with most PC parts listed on their site, Sex sells graphics cards on a lucky dip basis, but I was also pretty clueless about brands and manufacturer specifics back then, so I didn't realise that the Asus Direct Copper 2 version I received was actually pretty good. Fast forward 6 years and, once more, I blindly ordered a GTX 670 from Sex's website, only to receive the same Asus model, this time for a considerably more reasonable £37. The 670 was from the first generation of cards in the Kepler series, an architecture that, while revolutionary in its day, is about to lose compatibility with the latest driver updates from Nvidia, effectively nerfing its performance in future releases. This month I'm saying farewell to Kepler in my own way, with a short series of videos on some of their cards. In this one, I'm putting the old girl through her paces on the RPG PC, a Ryzen 3100 based budget PC with 16GB of RAM, approximately the same spec as the average PC, according to the Steam Hardware Survey. Okay, let's lay this out like a good old-fashioned shit sandwich, starting with a slice of the good. Fortnite can give some pretty excellent performance on the GTX 670. If you are content at running at competitive settings, you'll see over 110 FPS on average. For me, 1% lows dipped into the 40s, but Fortnite is sort of infamous for stuttering, so your mileage may vary. The 670 is also capable of some impressive performance in Rocket League, even at 1080 high settings. I saw an average of 131 and 1% lows of 54, and I'm sure you could drop quality a little if you were looking to max out a 144Hz monitor. Okay, now for our first steaming layer of filling. Warzone's developers seem to have shit the bed with the May update, meaning owners of the GTX 600 and 700 series cards have to suffer massive blocky Minecraft shadows obscuring half the screen. Admittedly, I'm recording this in June to go out in July, and it's entirely possible this issue will have been fixed by then, but I can't exactly pretend like it's not a massive problem while I'm testing. 720 low would otherwise make for an acceptable experience, averaging 58 and dropping only as low as about 40. 1080 is a bit of a stretch, averaging low 40s with 1% lows of 30. Another jewel in the Kepler gaming experience in 2021 is Horizon Zero Dawn, a quite beautiful game if you can look past the weird glitchy artifacts that appear all the time on this family of cards. Weirdly enough, I found after a while I did start to ignore the glitches, but nevertheless, despite managing 48 FPS average and 39 FPS lows at favour performance settings, I can't in good conscience recommend any GTX 600 or 700 cards for this title. If you ever thought that frenetic, action-packed first-person shooter Doom Eternal would be more fun if it were a bit more relaxed and leisurely paced, might I recommend playing on a GTX 670 at 1080 low settings. The game averaged 33 FPS, with lows in the high teens, making it frequently look and feel like playing in slow motion. If your controls weren't equally affected, it might almost be considered a hack. The GTX 670's performance in Forza Horizon 4 isn't exactly shit, but it's not far off. Think of it as a layer of soggy lettuce in my metaphorical snack. At 1080 medium, averages were 45 FPS and 1% lows were 35. I'd suggest dropping to 1080 low or 720 medium to get a better experience here. Well, I don't know what I expected, but Cyberpunk didn't perform particularly well on the GTX 670. At 720 low settings, averages were in the mid-30s, with 1% lows of just 20. I guess things could have been worse, and this isn't any better than the competing AMD cards of the same era, but it's still pretty far from enjoyable. I can't be too mad at Resident Evil Village here. By rights, it shouldn't even work. The game requires DX12 compatibility, and the GTX 670 simply doesn't have it. However, it turns out that installing the old 368.81 drivers makes the game eminently playable. However, the GTX 670 lacks the compute power and VRAM capacity that modern games need, and this shows in a slightly sub-30 average and 1% lows in the high teens. Onto the more palatable top layer of the sandwich, and Apex Legends at 1080 with a mix of low and very low settings scores a 47 FPS average and 30 FPS 1% lows. Dropping to 720 isn't my favourite solution for battle royales, but if you absolutely must have a 60 FPS experience, it might be the only way of getting there. For a new game that's still in development, Enlisted performs pretty well on this old GPU. 1080 and a mix of low and medium settings, slightly dropped from the default settings chosen by the game, resulted in an average FPS of 54 and lows of 37, plus an absolutely haywire afterburner overlay. Finally, if you were to ask me, how well can the GTX 670 play Genshin Impact at 1080 medium settings, I'd have to say, dunno. The 60 FPS cap is seemingly being enforced now, as even disabling VSync didn't work. Averages, therefore, are, unsurprisingly, 60 FPS, with lows dipping down to 47.5, usually when there are any kind of particle or similar effects on screen. Now, admittedly, the way I've presented this doesn't look great for the GTX 670, but that's not me being completely fair. The card is, after all, one of the cheaper cards on the used market. Even in the Scalper Pandemic, you shouldn't have to pay more than £75 for one, and compared to the similarly priced R9 270X, it outperforms that card in everything except Doom Eternal. Despite this, I'd be inclined to hold out for the lowest possible price on one of these. It has the same compatibility issues as those first-gen GCN cards, but also suffers from some ugly graphical glitches in some games, and the discontinuation of driver support is only going to make this card less relevant in the future. If you can find one for the right price, have a PSU with a couple of 6-pin connectors, and can accept the inherent limitations of Kepler, this should make an acceptable stopgap until the market returns to normal. If it ever does. Well, that was a bit of a downer. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.